Upon returning from a trip, a father finds his 7-year-old daughter on the roof, forced by her stepmother to clean the gutters. The rescue reveals not only a fragile body, but a soul marked by fear and neglect. With hidden proof in drawings, reports, and cameras, doubt turns into certainty of abuse, so he chooses to act not as a millionaire, but as a father, and forever changes the girl's destiny. The Hayes Mansion, located in the elegant Bel Air neighborhood of Los Angeles, flaunted the wealth and power of Gustavo Hayes, one of the most influential entrepreneurs in the American real estate sector. The enormous glass windows reflected the afternoon sun as the driver parked the black Mercedes in the circular driveway of the residence. After 3 weeks in Europe closing million-dollar deals, Gustavo was finally returning home. "Thank you, Josiah. You can rest for the rest of the day," Gustavo told the driver as he stepped out of the vehicle, adjusting his custom-made Italian suit jacket. The 45-year-old man, with graying hair at his temples and piercing brown eyes, ascended the marble steps with his leather briefcase in his right hand. He was eager to see his daughter, Helen, who was just 7 years old. Since losing his wife, Marianne, 2 years ago in an accident, little Helen had become his only true emotional bond. A year ago, Gustavo had remarried Deborah Montgomery, a Los Angeles socialite, known for her stunning beauty and constant presence in society columns. The marriage had been rushed, as he now silently admitted to himself, an attempt to provide a maternal figure for Helen. Upon entering the spacious entrance hall, Gustavo found the silence in the house strange. "Helen? Sweetheart?" he called, placing his briefcase on the marble and glass coffee table. "Deborah." Valda, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for over a decade, appeared quickly from the kitchen. "Mr. Hayes, it's good you've arrived," she said, with an expression of relief that did not go unnoticed. "Where is my daughter, Valda?" "And Deborah?" "Mrs. Montgomery went out for lunch with her friends. She said she'd be back later," the housekeeper replied, twisting her apron between her fingers. "And little Helen?" A noise from upstairs interrupted the conversation, something like an object falling on the roof. "What was that?" Gustavo asked, frowning. "Oh my God," Valda murmured, averting her gaze. Gustavo rushed up the stairs, his heart pounding. He followed the corridor leading to the bedrooms and noticed the window at the end of the hallway was open. He approached, and as he looked outside, his heart nearly stopped. Helen, his little daughter, was on the mansion's roof, wearing enormous rubber gloves for her delicate little hands, trying to clean the gutters. Her fragile little body visibly trembled as she dangerously balanced on the sloped tiles. "Helen!" Gustavo cried, horrified. "Sweetheart, don't move." "Daddy's coming to get you." The girl turned, her brown eyes wide with fear but also immense relief at seeing her father. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, her voice choked. "You're back!" "Don't move, darling," Gustavo repeated, already leaning out the window. Carefully, he extended his arms and reached his daughter, pulling her inside with all the care in the world. As soon as he brought her to the safety of the hallway, Gustavo hugged Helen tightly against his chest. He could feel the child's racing heart, the tremor in her tiny body. He gently pushed her back to examine her face and was shocked by what he saw. Helen was thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes. Her little hands were rough and there was a scratch on her left cheek. "My love, what were you doing out there?" "It's extremely dangerous," he asked, trying to control the anger rising within him, not directed at his daughter but at the absurd situation. Helen lowered her eyes, frightened. "Aunt Deborah said I needed to clean the gutters because they were clogged, and my books would get wet if it rained," she explained in a low voice. "She said I had to finish before you got here." Gustavo felt his blood boil. He placed his hands on his daughter's delicate shoulders, trying to control the fury in his voice. "Helen, never do that again, do you understand? You could have been seriously hurt. Cleaning gutters is not a job for children, much less for my little princess." The girl nodded, still trembling. "I'm sorry, Daddy." "You don't need to apologize, my love. You didn't do anything wrong." Gustavo hugged her again, smelling the scent of children's shampoo in her hair. "Let's go downstairs and have some hot chocolate. How about that?" Helen smiled shyly, the first genuine smile Gustavo had seen since his arrival. Hand in hand, they went down the stairs. In the kitchen, Valda was already preparing hot chocolate, as if she had guessed their request. "Valda, has this happened other times?" Gustavo asked in a low voice as Helen sat at the kitchen table. The housekeeper hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Hayes, Please, Valda, I need to know. Strange things have been happening when you travel, the woman confessed, lowering her voice even further. Mrs. Montgomery changes completely when you're not here. But she threatened to fire me if I said anything. Gustavo clenched his jaw. I understand. Don't worry, I'll handle this. At that moment, the sound of high heels echoed through the entrance hall. Deborah entered the kitchen, impeccably dressed in an Italian silk ensemble, with perfectly styled dark hair and flawless makeup. Darling, I didn't know you'd be back so early, she exclaimed, approaching to kiss him as if nothing were wrong. Gustavo accepted the kiss coldly, observing how Helen instinctively shrank in her chair at her stepmother's arrival. I found our daughter on the roof. Deborah, he said directly without mincing words, cleaning gutters. Deborah's smile wavered for a fraction of a second, but she quickly recomposed herself. Oh, how absurd. Helen, what were you doing up there? You know it's dangerous, young lady, she replied in a tone of feigned concern. I told you to play in the garden, not on the roof. Helen lowered her head, saying nothing, but Gustavo noticed her small hands clutching the hot chocolate mug. Curious, Gustavo said, keeping his voice controlled. Because she told me you ordered her to clean the gutters before I arrived. Deborah laughed, a melodious and calculated sound. Gustavo, darling, you know children. They make up stories all the time. Helen probably wanted to get your attention after you'd been away for so long. The entrepreneur watched his wife intently, searching for any sign of guilt in her perfectly made-up green eyes. He found nothing but well-disguised coldness. We'll talk about this later, he finally said, placing his hand protectively on his daughter's shoulder. Right now I want to spend some time with Helen. That night, after putting his daughter to bed, Gustavo went to the kitchen. Helen had eaten little at dinner, almost as if asking permission for each bite. This deeply bothered him. He decided to prepare something special for her. As he cut fruit for a smoothie, he heard light footsteps. Helen appeared at the kitchen door, hugging a well-worn teddy bear. Can't sleep, princess? He asked gently. Helen shook her head. Daddy, are you going to travel again? The question broke his heart. Not any time soon, my love. Why? Because when you travel, Aunt Deborah is different, the girl whispered, looking nervously over her shoulder as if afraid of being overheard. Different how, Helen? Gustavo knelt down to his daughter's height, holding her small hands. She yells at me. Says I'm ugly and stupid, Helen replied with tears in her eyes. Says you only put up with me because you have to, and that one day you'll send me away. Gustavo felt his body grow cold at his daughter's words. He tried to maintain his composure so as not to frighten little Helen further, but inside a storm was brewing. She took my books, Daddy, Helen continued, her voice choked. She said I didn't deserve to read nice stories. And also, the girl hesitated, hugging the teddy bear tighter. You can tell me everything, my love. Daddy's here now, Gustavo encouraged, stroking his daughter's brown hair. She threw away the book Mommy gave me before she went to heaven, Helen whispered, her eyes welling up. That was like a stab to Gustavo's chest. The book, The Star Girl, had been Marianne's last gift to Helen, a story about a girl who found solace looking at the night sky after losing her mother. Marianne had written a special dedication on the first page, knowing her illness was advanced. It was the most precious relic Helen possessed. Let's go take a look in your room, okay? Gustavo suggested, standing up and taking his daughter's hand. In Helen's room, decorated in shades of lilac and white, Gustavo immediately noticed the nearly empty bookshelf. Only a few schoolbooks occupied the furniture that once overflowed with children's stories. Where are all your books, Helen? He asked, trying to control his rising anger. Aunt Deborah said there were too many and they made a mess. She put some away and threw others in the trash, the girl replied, sitting on the edge of the bed, swinging her feet that didn't reach the floor. Gustavo opened the wardrobe, checked under the bed, looked in the cabinets. He couldn't find the special book anywhere. He was about to leave the room to confront Deborah when he noticed Helen taking something out from inside her pillowcase. I hid this so Aunt Deborah wouldn't see it, Helen explained, handing him a folded sheet of paper. Gustavo unfolded the paper and felt a lump in his throat. It was a child's drawing made with colored pencils. It showed a small figure, clearly Helen, surrounded by lines that looked like bars. Beside it, an adult figure with dark hair and a face red with anger screaming, represented by wavy lines coming from her mouth. In the corner of the paper, Helen had written in shaky handwriting, "When Daddy travels." At that moment, all doubts Gustavo might have had dissipated. Certainty of abuse replaced any uncertainty, and he knew exactly what he needed to do. "Helen, I'm going to keep this drawing, okay? And I promise I'll find your special book," he said, carefully folding the paper and placing it in the inside pocket of his suit jacket. After telling an improvised story and waiting for Helen to fall asleep, Gustavo gently closed the bedroom door and went downstairs. He found Deborah in the living room, leafing through a fashion magazine while savoring a glass of red wine. "We need to talk," he said firmly, remaining standing as he faced her. Deborah slowly closed the magazine, placing it on the coffee table. "Of course, darling." "About what?" "About what's been happening to Helen when I'm traveling." Deborah's calculated smile did not waver. "I don't understand what you mean. I want to know why my daughter was on the roof today, why she's thinner, why her books have disappeared. And most importantly," his voice hardened, "I want to know where the book Marianne gave her is." Deborah sighed theatrically, placing the wine glass on the table. "Gustavo, darling, you're tired from your trip, and clearly Helen has been manipulating your emotions. Children do that when they want attention. Answer my questions, Deborah." The woman rose gracefully, smoothing her silk dress. "Your daughter needs discipline, something you've never given her. Since I married you, I've been trying to educate her properly, but you always spoil her too much." "Discipline?" Gustavo repeated incredulously. "Sending a 7-year-old child onto the roof is discipline to you?" "Obviously she's making that up," Deborah countered, maintaining her composure. "Helen climbed up there herself, probably to get attention when she knew you were arriving. As for the books, there was too much dust on that shelf. I put most of them in boxes in the attic. Better for her health." "And the special book? The one Marianne gave her?" For an instant, something dark flickered in Deborah's gaze so quickly it would have been imperceptible to anyone not paying full attention. "I don't know what book you're talking about. Perhaps Helen lost it and is blaming me to avoid getting scolded." Gustavo took a deep breath, curbing the urge to explode. He knew that game well. Deborah would never admit anything directly. She would turn everything into a misunderstanding, a childish confusion. She was a master of manipulation. "Starting tomorrow, Helen will no longer be alone with you," Gustavo declared. "When I need to travel, she will come with me or stay with my parents." Deborah's face hardened for a second, but then her expression softened again. "As you wish, darling. I just think you're overreacting because of children's stories. But I understand your fatherly concern." Gustavo turned his back and went upstairs to check on Helen once more. The girl was sleeping, hugging her teddy bear, her breathing calm. He sat on the edge of the bed and lightly stroked his daughter's hair, silently promising that he would protect her at all costs. The next morning, while Helen had breakfast in the kitchen with Valda, Gustavo called his longtime lawyer and personal friend, "Maurice Carter, I need your urgent guidance." "Maurice," he said after explaining the situation in summary, "I want to protect my daughter and take the necessary legal steps." "Come to my office today at 10 a.m., Maurice replied, with the seriousness the situation demanded. "And Gustavo, document everything. Write down every conversation, every incident. Take photos of any physical evidence. We'll need to build a solid case." After hanging up, Gustavo entered the kitchen to find Helen eating pancakes prepared by Valda. The girl smiled shyly at seeing him. "Good morning, Princess. How did you sleep?" "Well, Daddy," she replied, although the dark circles were still visible on her little face. Deborah appeared at the kitchen door, impeccably dressed for her day of social engagements. "I'm having lunch with the hospital charity committee," she announced, adjusting the gold bracelet on her wrist. "Don't wait for me for lunch." "Don't worry," Gustavo replied coldly. "Helen and I have plans for the whole day." When Deborah left, Gustavo sat next to his daughter. "Helen, today we're going to do some important things together, okay? First, we're going to visit Dr. Frederick for a checkup. Then we'll have lunch at your favorite restaurant. And in the afternoon, we're going to visit Uncle Maurice at his office." "Okay, Daddy," Helen agreed, though her eyes revealed a hint of anxiety. Dr. Frederick Miller had been Helen's pediatrician since birth and a great family friend. In his modern office, located in a medical building on Wilshire Boulevard, he carefully examined the girl while chatting about cartoons to put her at ease. "Helen, can you wait a little bit in the playroom while I talk to your father?" the doctor gently asked after the examination. As soon as the girl left, Dr. Frederick's expression became serious. "Gustavo, Helen is underweight for her age. There are signs of mild malnutrition and anemia. I also noticed some marks on her arms that are consistent with adult hand gripping," he reported, showing the photographs he had taken during the examination. "Furthermore, she shows clear signs of anxiety and stress." "Have you documented all of this?" Gustavo asked, feeling a mixture of pain and anger. "Yes, I'm preparing a detailed medical report. As a doctor, I am legally obligated to report suspicions of child abuse, Gustavo," Frederick explained seriously. "But I understand you're already taking action." "Yes, I'm meeting with my lawyer today." "I need everything documented, Frederick. Every mark, every sign." "You'll have my full report today," the doctor assured him, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. "And Gustavo, you did well to act quickly. Many children suffer in silence for years." At the restaurant, Gustavo watched with a heavy heart as Helen ate little, almost fearfully, looking around as if expecting to be reprimanded at any moment. "You can eat as much as you like, my love. No one will scold you for eating," he gently encouraged. Helen looked up at her father. "Aunt Deborah says fat girls are ugly and no one likes them," she whispered. Gustavo had to take a deep breath to control his anger. "That's not true, Princess. The important thing is to be healthy and happy. And you can eat as much as you want always." As he watched his daughter finally relax and savor her food, Gustavo made a silent promise to himself. Nothing and no one would ever hurt his little Helen again, and Deborah would pay for every tear she had made his daughter shed. Maurice Carter's office occupied half of the top floor of a corporate building in Beverly Hills. The panoramic view of Los Angeles contrasted with the seriousness of the moment. Helen had stayed in the waiting room with Maurice's secretary, who gently offered her paper and colored pencils to draw. "The situation is more serious than I imagined," Gustavo said, showing the medical report and the drawing made by Helen. Maurice, a 50-year-old man with graying hair and keen eyes, adjusted his thin-rimmed glasses as he analyzed the documents. "We are facing a clear case of psychological abuse and neglect, possibly with elements of physical abuse as well," the lawyer concluded, placing the papers on the dark wooden desk. "But we need to build an irrefutable case, Gustavo. Deborah is an influential woman, well-connected socially. She will play dirty." "What do you suggest?" Gustavo asked, leaning forward in his chair. "First, we need more evidence. Helen's testimony is valuable, but a judge will want to see more than that," Maurice explained. "I recommend installing discrete cameras in the common areas of the house, living room, kitchen, hallways. Nothing in bathrooms or bedrooms, obviously. I can arrange that today. Second, we need witnesses. Household staff, the driver, the gardener, Helen's teachers, anyone who might have witnessed suspicious behavior from Deborah." Gustavo nodded. "Valda, the housekeeper, has already hinted to me that she witnessed things, but she was afraid of losing her job." "Excellent. We'll prepare a formal statement with her." Maurice made notes on his pad. "Third, we need a psychological evaluation. I'll recommend a psychologist specializing in child abuse victims. She'll know how to approach Helen without causing further trauma." "And what about custody?" "I don't want my daughter to spend another minute alone with Deborah," Gustavo declared, the concern evident in his voice. "We will request protective orders and temporary custody as soon as we have sufficient evidence," Maurice replied. "But we need to act cautiously. If Deborah realizes what we're doing, she might create a narrative against you, alleging parental alienation or something similar." "I understand. For now, don't travel. Don't leave Helen alone with her, and start documenting everything. Conversations, strange behaviors, anything that might strengthen our case." As he left the office with Helen, Gustavo felt more determined. He had a plan of action and was ready to execute it. On the way home, he stopped at a store specializing in security equipment. "I need discrete high-resolution cameras with motion activation and audio," he explained to the salesperson, "for residential installation." An hour later, he left with all the necessary equipment and a technician who would perform the installation that very afternoon. While Deborah was out at her social engagements, while the technician worked discreetly, Gustavo took Helen to the backyard, where they played together for the first time in weeks. The sound of childish laughter, something he hadn't heard in a long time, filled his heart with hope and strengthened his resolve. "Daddy, look!" Helen exclaimed, pointing to a hummingbird approaching one of the garden flowers. "It's so tiny and fast." "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Gustavo replied, tenderly observing his daughter's amazed expression. "Do you know why they can fly so fast? Because they are free, Helen, and that's how you're going to be too, free and happy." The girl smiled, not fully understanding the profound meaning in her father's words, but feeling safe for the first time in a long while. When Deborah returned in the late afternoon, the cameras were already installed, invisible to inattentive eyes, strategically positioned to capture what was happening in the main areas of the house. "How was your day?" she asked upon entering, kissing Gustavo superficially on the cheek. "Productive," he replied, maintaining a neutral expression. "Helen and I spent the day together." Deborah's gaze quickly swept over Helen, who was silently playing with building blocks on the living room rug. For an instant, Gustavo caught an expression of disdain, quickly masked by an artificial smile. "That's good, darling. I'm going to take a shower and come down for dinner," she said, going up the stairs with her high heels echoing on the marble. In the following days, Gustavo methodically implemented his strategy. He obtained Valda's formal testimony, in which she reported several episodes of mistreatment when he was traveling. Helen being left without meals as punishment for trivial disobediences, being locked in her room for hours, having her toys and books confiscated. "I should have told you sooner, Mr. Hayes," the housekeeper cried during her testimony. "But she threatened to fire me, and I need this job to support my grandchildren." "You're doing the right thing now, Valda," Gustavo reassured her. "And don't worry about your job. I'll always be here to support you." The former driver, whom Deborah had dismissed under dubious pretexts, was also located and gave a statement. Stephen Smith reported that his employer frequently ordered him to leave Helen alone at home or in the car while she attended social engagements. Once, she left the girl in the car for over 2 hours while she was shopping. I stayed with the little one, of course. I wasn't going to leave her alone, but Mrs. Montgomery didn't want to know. She said it was just a child and that she wouldn't break, the man reported, visibly indignant. "That's why she fired me, Mr. Hayes, because I started questioning these things." Dr. Caroline Mitchell, the child psychologist recommended by Maurice, began seeing Helen twice a week. After a few sessions, she presented an alarming preliminary report. "Helen shows clear signs of emotional trauma," the psychologist explained to Gustavo. In her office, decorated with pastel tones and therapeutic toys, she has a constant fear of abandonment, low self-esteem, and exhibits behaviors associated with emotional and nutritional deprivation. "Will she recover?" Gustavo asked, his voice choked. "With time, love, and appropriate therapy, yes. Children are incredibly resilient, Gustavo," Caroline replied with a gentle smile. "But it's crucial to remove her from the abusive environment as soon as possible." The installed cameras began to capture concrete evidence. Even with Gustavo's presence at home, Deborah couldn't fully maintain her facade. There were moments when she didn't realize she was being observed and let her true nature slip. Looks of contempt directed at Helen, derogatory comments whispered when she thought no one was listening, small cruelties disguised as discipline. One afternoon, while Gustavo was supposedly in his office, the kitchen camera captured Deborah prohibiting Helen from eating a cookie, snatching it from her hand with unnecessary force. "Greedy girls get fat and ugly. No one likes fat children," she hissed, throwing the cookie in the trash. "Your father only puts up with you because he has to. If you get fat, not even he will want you anymore." Helen didn't cry. She just lowered her head in silence, a behavior that indicated this was routine. On another day, when Gustavo had to resolve an emergency at the company and left Helen with Deborah for a few hours, the cameras recorded the stepmother locking the girl in a small cleaning supplies closet for nearly an hour because she had accidentally spilled a glass of juice. "I'll leave you in there until you learn not to be clumsy," Deborah shouted, ignoring the child's frightened sobs. "And don't even think about telling your father, because no one believes lying children." When Gustavo returned and asked for Helen, Deborah calmly replied that she was playing in her room. Only after searching the house did he find his daughter still locked in the closet, curled up and trembling, That night after putting Helen to sleep, Gustavo confronted Deborah again. "How could you lock a child in a dark closet?" he asked, barely containing his fury. Deborah's eyes widened in feigned surprise. "What are you talking about? Helen must have hidden while playing and got stuck by accident." "Stop lying, Deborah. I know everything." For an instant, a calculating expression crossed her eyes. "I don't know what that girl is making up, Gustavo, but you should be careful. Manipulative children grow up to become problematic teenagers." In his personal office, after Deborah retired for the night, Gustavo reviewed all the evidence collected so far. The medical report, psychological evaluation, witness testimonies, camera recordings. It was a clear and consistent pattern of abuse. He also requested bank statements from the past few months. As he suspected, he found regular transfers from the couple's joint account to Deborah's private account, always during the periods when he was traveling. Considerable sums that had no explanation. "Everything is ready," he told Maurice over the phone. "We have more than enough evidence." "Excellent," the lawyer replied. "I'll file the request for protective orders tomorrow morning. Be prepared, Gustavo. When Deborah is notified, all hell will break loose." "I'm ready," Gustavo affirmed with determination. "For Helen, I'm ready to face anything." After hanging up, he went to his daughter's room. Helen was sleeping, hugging her teddy bear, her breathing calm. Gustavo adjusted the blanket and gently kissed her forehead. "I promise I'll protect you, my love," he whispered. "No one will hurt you again. Never again." The next morning, Gustavo personally took Helen to Rainbow School, a prestigious private school in the Santa Monica neighborhood. In recent months, since he had started traveling more frequently, he had delegated this task to drivers or to Deborah. He realized with a pang of guilt that he had lost touch with his daughter's school routine. "Good morning." "Mr. Hayes, what a pleasant surprise to see you in person," greeted Rachel Brooks, the pedagogical coordinator, a 40-year-old woman with a gentle expression and attentive gaze. "Helen, dear, your classmates are already in the room. Why don't you go join them while I have a quick chat with your father?" Helen looked at Gustavo as if asking permission. He nodded, encouraging her with a smile. "Go on, princess. Daddy will pick you up at the end of the afternoon, okay?" As soon as the girl walked away, Rachel turned to Gustavo, her expression becoming serious. "Mr. Hayes, actually, I was about to contact you," she said, indicating her office door. "May we speak privately for a moment?" Inside the cozy office, decorated with framed children's artwork, Rachel was direct. "I've noticed troubling changes in Helen's behavior in recent months," she explained. "She used to be a participatory, cheerful child. She interacted well with her classmates. Lately, she's been isolating herself during recess, rarely smiles, and her classroom participation has decreased dramatically." Gustavo nodded, feeling the weight of guilt increase. "I noticed changes, too, when I returned from my trip." "There's more," Rachel continued, opening a folder. "Yesterday, during physical education class, teacher Daniela noticed marks on Helen's neck. When questioned, the girl said she slipped on the stairs, but the explanation doesn't match the type of mark." She slid a photo across the table. Gustavo felt his stomach churn as he saw the purplish mark on his daughter's delicate neck, clearly in the shape of adult fingers. "As is our protocol in cases of suspected abuse, we have documented and recorded everything," Rachel explained. "And as educators, we are legally obligated to notify Child Protective Services." "I understand and I appreciate it," Gustavo replied, regaining his composure. "In fact, I'm already taking legal action. My wife, Deborah, has—" he hesitated, the words difficult to pronounce, "has been mistreating Helen when I'm away. I'm gathering evidence to request protective orders and sole custody." Rachel seemed relieved. "I'm glad to know that you are already aware and taking action. Often parents deny or minimize these signs, which makes everything more difficult for the child." "I almost made that mistake," Gustavo admitted. "I believed Deborah's facade for too long. But now I am determined to protect my daughter. Count on our collaboration. The school psychologist, Dr. Miranda, has been following Helen. With your authorization, she can prepare a report to support your case." "That would be extremely helpful," Gustavo agreed. "My lawyer will contact you to formalize the request." Upon leaving the school, Gustavo immediately called Maurice, reporting the conversation and the discovery of the mark on Helen's neck. "This is serious, Gustavo," the lawyer said. We're talking about clear physical abuse. I'm going to fast-track the request for protective orders. In the meantime, do not leave Helen alone with Deborah under any circumstances. You can count on it. I'll work from home until we resolve this. At the Hayes Enterprises office, located in a modern building on Sunset Boulevard, Gustavo called an emergency meeting with his directors. I need to be absent for an indefinite period to resolve an urgent family matter, he announced to his small team of trusted executives. Robert will assume the interim presidency with my remote supervision when possible. Robert Adams, the financial director and a longtime friend, waited for the other executives to leave the room before approaching Gustavo. Are you okay, friend? Can I help in any way? Gustavo hesitated for a moment, but felt he needed allies in that difficult time. He confided in Robert about the situation with Helen and Deborah. My God, Gustavo, Robert exclaimed, shocked. That woman always seemed controlling, but this, I never imagined. No one imagined. She maintains a perfect facade, Gustavo replied bitterly. But now what matters is protecting Helen and ensuring that Deborah can never hurt her again. Count on me for whatever you need. The company is in good hands. Focus on your daughter. Upon returning home, Gustavo found Deborah in the hall, dressed to go out with a displeased expression. Where were you? She asked. I tried to call you several times. Resolving important matters, Gustavo replied dryly. Are you going out? Yes, charity committee meeting. Don't wait for me for dinner. As soon as Deborah left, Gustavo quickly went up to her room. He hated the idea of invading someone's privacy, even someone like Deborah, but he needed to find Helen's special book. He searched in drawers in the closet under the bed. Nothing. Frustrated, he was about to give up when he noticed a small key in the jewelry box on the dressing table. Something told him it might be important. He put the key in his pocket and continued his search through the house. At the end of the second-floor hallway, there was a door always locked that Deborah called her private studio, where she supposedly practiced painting as a hobby. Gustavo had never entered there, respecting his wife's personal space. Now, with growing suspicion, he decided to check if the key he found would open that door. It fit perfectly. Upon entering the room, he did not find a painting studio but a storage room for confiscated items. On meticulously organized shelves were all of Helen's books, her favorite toys, photos of the girl with her biological mother, and even clothes Marianne had bought for her daughter. In the center of a shelf, like a macabre trophy, was the book The Star Girl, as with its worn blue cover. Gustavo picked it up with trembling hands, opening to the first page to confirm Marianne's dedication. To my little star Helen, so you never forget that, even when I'm far away, I shine in the sky for you. With eternal love, Mommy. The discovery of that sanctuary of cruelty left Gustavo stunned. It wasn't just neglect or excessive discipline. It was a calculated effort to erase Marianne's memory and break Helen's spirit. He collected the book and some photos, closed the door and quickly left, fearing his rage would make him lose control. In the afternoon, he picked Helen up from school punctually, as promised. The joy in his daughter's eyes at seeing him waiting at the gate was like a balm for his wounded heart. "Hello, Princess. How was your day?" he asked, hugging her affectionately. "It was good. Daddy?" "The teacher praised my drawing," Helen replied, showing a colorful paper where she had drawn a father and daughter holding hands under a starry sky. In the car, Gustavo noticed Helen nervously touching her neck, as if wanting to hide something. Gently, he softly moved the girl's hand away and saw the mark the coordinator had photographed. "Helen, who did this to you?" he asked, keeping his voice calm despite the fury he felt. The girl lowered her eyes. "It was an accident, Daddy. My love, you can tell me the truth. I'm here to protect you, remember? No one will hurt you again." After a few moments of silence, Helen whispered, "It was Aunt Deborah. She got angry because I found a picture of my mommy in my notebook." Gustavo took a deep breath, containing his rage. "Thank you for telling me the truth, my brave one. This will never happen again, I promise." At home, while Helen had a snack in the kitchen under Valda's watchful eye, Gustavo received a call from Maurice. "The request for protective orders has been filed," the lawyer informed. "Given the seriousness of the case and the evidence presented, the judge should review it urgently." Meanwhile, Child Protective Services was notified by the school and should conduct an assessment visit in the coming days. And when will Deborah be notified? Probably tomorrow or the day after. Be prepared, Gustavo. She won't accept this passively. I'm ready. After hanging up, Gustavo went to the kitchen where he found Helen drawing while eating cookies. He sat beside her and took the Stargirl book from his briefcase. Look what I found, Princess. Helen's eyes widened, shining with emotion. My book from Mommy, she exclaimed, taking it with reverence. I thought it was gone forever. Some special things always find their way back to us, Gustavo said, moved to see the genuine happiness on his daughter's face. Helen opened the book to the first page, tracing the dedication with her little fingers, as if she could feel her mother's presence through those words. Daddy, can we read it tonight before bed? Of course, my love. Every night you want. That night, as he read the familiar story to Helen, Gustavo felt a mixture of emotions. Guilt for having allowed the situation to reach that point, anger for everything Deborah had done, fear of what was yet to come, but above all, an iron determination to rebuild his daughter's safety and happiness. When Helen finally fell asleep, hugging the precious book, Gustavo received a message from Maurice. Protective orders granted by the judge on an interim basis. Deborah will be notified tomorrow and must maintain a minimum distance of 100 meters from Helen. The hearing to discuss temporary custody is scheduled for next week. It was the first concrete step. The battle was just beginning, but now Helen would have the protection of the law on her side. Gustavo gently kissed his sleeping daughter's forehead, feeling for the first time in days, hopeful about the future. Deborah's reaction to the judicial notification was exactly as Maurice had predicted, explosive and calculating. The court officer had just left when Gustavo heard the main door violently slammed open. Helen was at school as per the lawyer's advice to avoid direct confrontations. What does this mean? Deborah screamed, shaking the official papers in her hand. Her face, normally composed in a mask of artificial serenity, was contorted with rage. Protective orders? Child abuse? Have you lost your mind, Gustavo? He remained calm, keeping a safe distance. It's exactly what's written, Deborah. You are legally prohibited from approaching Helen or me until the hearing. This is ridiculous. Based on what? On the imagination of a spoiled child? On the word of disgruntled employees? Her tone wavered between indignation and contempt, based on concrete evidence. Medical reports, psychological evaluations, witnesses, and... Gustavo paused deliberately. Very enlightening recordings. Deborah's face paled momentarily. Recordings? Versummite? Security cameras, Deborah, installed throughout the house. They capture absolutely everything. She narrowed her eyes, recalculating her strategy. You can't do that. It's an invasion of privacy. Actually, I can. It's my house, and when there's suspicion of child abuse, the law is on my side. Deborah threw the papers onto the coffee table, quickly regaining her composure. Her voice was now cold, controlled. You're going to regret this, Gustavo. No one will believe that the dedicated stepmother, who organizes charity events for underprivileged children, is an abuser. Have you thought about the scandal? What this will do to your business, to the image of your precious Helen? Your threats no longer work on me, Gustavo replied, impassive. The only thing that matters to me is my daughter's safety. You have until tomorrow to remove your belongings, always accompanied by the court officer. After that, I don't want to see you again. Deborah let out a dry laugh. That remains to be seen. You still don't know what I'm capable of, darling. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. By the way, I hope you have a good lawyer. Mine is the best money can buy. Your money, by the way. After Deborah's tempestuous exit, Gustavo immediately called Maurice. She's going to play dirty, he reported. She threatened to use her public image against us and has already hired a lawyer. That was expected, Maurice replied. People like Deborah always resort to image manipulation. But we have facts on our side, Gustavo. Facts are more powerful than facades. In the following days, Deborah's strategy began to clearly unfold. First came the public relations campaign. She gave an exclusive interview to Society and Style magazine, presenting herself as the victim of a controlling husband. I always gave my best to that child, she declared with carefully rehearsed tears. Gustavo never accepted that another woman could take Marianne's place. He uses his own daughter as an instrument of revenge against me. Then came the attempts at sabotage. Valda reported that she received a significant cash offer to change her testimony and say that she had never seen Deborah mistreat Helen. I wouldn't betray little Helen for all the money in the world, Mr. Hayes, the housekeeper affirmed, indignant. But I thought you should know what she's trying to do. Dr. Frederick also reported that his office received a strange visit from a man who identified himself as an advisor to the Hayes family, requesting alterations to Helen's medical record. Obviously, I refused and expelled him from the office, the doctor recounted. But this shows her desperation, Gustavo. Rachel Brooks, the school coordinator, called alarmed to report that Deborah had tried to pick Helen up after school, disrespecting the court order. Fortunately, house staff was alerted and prevented contact, Rachel explained, but she caused a scene, shouting that she was the girl's stepmother and had the right to take her. We had to call security. The case began to attract media attention. The Hayes name, associated with large real estate developments, and Deborah's social status made the story juicy for the tabloids. Sensationalist headlines began to emerge. Real estate heir accuses socialite of child abuse. $1 million custody battle over 7-year-old girl. Gustavo did his best to protect Helen from this media circus. He kept her home when possible, limited her access to television and electronic devices, and intensified her sessions with the psychologist to help her process the events. How is she coping with all of this? He asked Dr. Caroline after one of the sessions. Surprisingly well, considering the circumstances, the psychologist replied. Helen has admirable resilience. The fact that you are present, offering security and validating her feelings makes all the difference. Does she talk about Deborah in the sessions? Yes, and that's healthy. She's starting to understand that her stepmother's behavior was wrong, that it wasn't her fault and that she's safe now. The following week, Child Protective Services sent a social worker to conduct a home visit. Laura Thompson, a middle-aged woman with keen eyes and a professional demeanor, spent an afternoon observing the interaction between Gustavo and Helen, speaking separately with each and assessing the home environment. Mr. Hayes, I'm going to be frank, she said, at the end of the visit. I've worked on hundreds of child abuse allegation cases. Many are custody disputes where one parent uses false accusations against the other. Gustavo felt his heart clench. Are you suggesting that's the case here? On the contrary, Laura continued. What I see here is a clearly traumatized child who feels safe with her father. The signs of abuse are consistent with the reports, and Helen's gradual recovery under your exclusive care corroborates our initial assessment. That's a relief to hear, Gustavo admitted. I should also inform you that I visited your wife, Mrs. Deborah, at her current address. The difference in behavior was revealing. What do you mean? She presented an extremely polished and rehearsed version. She spoke of Helen as if she were a difficult child who needed firm guidance. When questioned about specific incidents, she alternated between vehement denial and pedagogical justifications. Laura paused. It's a pattern we recognize well, the two-faced abuser. One behavior in front of authorities, a completely different one in private. Will your report mention that? My report will detail everything I observed. Mr. Hayes, it is my professional obligation to be impartial, but it is also my duty to protect the best interest of the child. The social worker's visit was another favorable element in the process, but Deborah continued her public campaign to discredit Gustavo. Gossip show commentators speculated about the case, often portraying him as a bitter widower, incapable of allowing another woman to raise his daughter. This changed when Paul Vance, a respected investigative journalist from the Los Angeles Times, decided to delve deeper into the story. Unlike social columnists who fed on rumors, Paul sought out documents, records, and verifiable sources. His extensive article, published in a Sunday edition, changed the tone of the coverage. Beyond appearances, the hidden face of a child abuse case. The text detailed, with clinical precision and without sensationalism, the medical evidence, verified testimonies, and patterns of abusive behavior. Without violating Helen's privacy, the report exposed the dichotomy between Deborah's public image and her private actions. The duty of responsible journalism, Paul wrote at the close of the article, is not to feed speculation about family dramas, but to protect the vulnerable by bringing the truth to light, however uncomfortable it may be for the powerful. Public opinion began to shift. Deborah's attempts to portray herself as a victim lost traction in the face of documented facts. Her social allies, initially vocal in her defense, discreetly retreated. On the eve of the preliminary hearing to discuss temporary custody, Gustavo received an unexpected phone call. "Mr. Hayes? This is Claudia Miller, former housekeeper for the Montgomery family," a hesitant voice said. "I worked for Mrs. Deborah's parents for 20 years, until they prematurely retired me when she married you. How can I help you, Mrs. Miller?" "Actually, it's I who can help you. I read Mr. Vance's report, and I can no longer remain silent. Mrs. Deborah, she always had problems with children. There were incidents with her nephews, with employees' children. The family always hushed everything up, paying for people's silence. Would you be willing to testify to this officially?" Gustavo asked, feeling his heart race. "Yes, sir. I'm too old to be afraid of reprisals anymore. That girl deserves justice." Gustavo relayed the information to Maurice, who immediately prepared Claudia to testify at the next day's hearing. "This could be decisive, Gustavo," the lawyer explained. "It establishes a pattern of behavior that predates your marriage. It demolishes the argument that Deborah is being unfairly accused of being the stepmother." That night, as he put Helen to bed, Gustavo felt renewed hope. "Daddy, tomorrow is an important day, right?" the girl asked, surprising him with her perception. "Yes, my love." "How do you know?" "I heard you talking to Uncle Maurice," she replied, hugging her teddy bear. "Is it about Aunt Deborah not being able to stay with me anymore?" Gustavo sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "It's about making sure you're always safe and happy, Helen, about adults making the right decisions to protect children." Helen nodded, with a wisdom beyond her years. "You know, Daddy, I'm not scared. Not anymore, because you're here. I always will be, Princess. I promise." As he watched his daughter fall asleep, Gustavo reflected on the path they had traveled in recent weeks. From the horror of discovery to the mobilization to protect her, from collecting evidence to legal proceedings, a painful but necessary journey that would begin to be resolved in court the next day. On the other side of the city, in a luxurious apartment, Deborah was also preparing for the legal battle. What she still didn't know was that her own actions had built an irrefutable case against her, and that the truth, for so long hidden behind social facades, was about to fully come to light. The Los Angeles Superior Court. Stanley Mosque Courthouse commanded respect, with its modern and imposing architecture. Gustavo arrived early, accompanied by Maurice. Helen was being cared for by Valda, protected from the tense environment of a courtroom. As per Dr. Caroline's guidance, the girl would only be brought in when necessary for her testimony, in a private setting and with psychological support. "We are well prepared," Maurice assured him, as they walked through the wide corridors. "The evidence is solid, the witnesses are confirmed, and the case has been assigned to Judge Teresa Campbell." "Is she good?" Gustavo asked, adjusting his tie. "She is known for her impartiality and absolute focus on the well-being of children. She is not impressed by social status or economic power. She's exactly what we need." In the courtroom, Gustavo immediately spotted Deborah, sitting beside her lawyer, Albert Mendelssohn, famous for defending celebrities and politicians in high-profile cases. She was impeccably dressed in a sober navy blue ensemble, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup discreet, the perfect image of a dedicated and wronged wife. When their gazes met, Deborah offered a cold, confident smile. Gustavo maintained a neutral expression, recalling Maurice's advice. "Don't show excessive emotions. Maintain your composure. Let the evidence speak for itself." Judge Teresa Campbell entered the room, a 60-year-old woman with short gray hair and a penetrating gaze. After the initial formalities, she went straight to the point. "This hearing aims to determine the temporary custody of the minor Helen Hayes, age 7, and to assess the validity of the protective orders already granted on an interim basis," she declared, observing the documents. "Given the delicate nature of the case and involving a child, I rule that part of this hearing be held behind closed doors. Only the directly involved parties, their legal representatives, and the called witnesses shall remain." After the spectators and journalists exited, the judge proceeded. "Mr. Carter, present your case." Gustavo's lawyer rose and, with clinical precision, began to present the facts. He presented the medical reports documenting Helen's malnutrition and the physical marks of aggression. He displayed Dr. Caroline's psychological report, highlighting the signs of emotional trauma. He showed the opinion of social worker Laura Thompson, which corroborated the indications of abuse. Then he moved on to the most impactful evidence, selected excerpts from the security camera recordings. The courtroom fell into absolute silence as they watched Deborah yelling at Helen, humiliating her, depriving her of food, locking her in the closet. Deborah's face remained impassive, but her fingers gripped the edge of the table with increasing force. Albert Mendelsohn, trying to regain control of the situation, argued, "Your Honor, these recordings were obtained without my client's consent, in clear violation of her privacy." "Mr. Mendelsohn," the judge replied firmly, "in cases of suspected child abuse, the protection of the child takes precedence over privacy considerations. Furthermore, the cameras were installed in common areas of the residence, which is permitted by law." Maurice then called the witnesses. Valda recounted the episodes of mistreatment she had witnessed. Stephen, the former driver, described how Helen was left alone for hours. Dr. Frederick confirmed the medical evidence of neglect and physical abuse. Finally, Claudia Miller, the former housekeeper for the Montgomery family, gave her crucial testimony. Since she was a teenager, Mrs. Deborah exhibited problematic behavior with younger children, she reported. There was a particularly serious incident with her nephew, her sister's son. The boy was found locked in the basement during a family party. He had been there for hours, scared and hungry. Mrs. Deborah, then 16, claimed it was a prank, but the boy said she locked him up as punishment for touching her belongings. Was this reported to the authorities? The judge asked. "No, Your Honor, the Montgomery family has considerable influence. The matter was handled internally, on the condition that Deborah undergo therapy. But other incidents occurred over the years, always with the same pattern. Weaker children being intimidated when no adults were observing." Albert Mendelsohn rose again, agitated. "Your Honor, this is absurd. Are we judging alleged events that occurred over 20 years ago? This witness clearly holds a grudge against my client for having been dismissed from her services." "Actually," Claudia replied calmly, "I was generously retired with a substantial financial package. The implicit condition was my silence about what I knew." When it was the defense's turn, Albert Mendelsohn tried to present Deborah as a dedicated stepmother who merely sought to impose healthy boundaries on a spoiled child. He argued that Gustavo, feeling guilty about his frequent absences, couldn't establish appropriate discipline and resented anyone who did. He presented testimonies from socialite friends who described Deborah as loving and maternally devoted. However, his case began to crumble when the judge requested concrete evidence to refute the abuse evidence, particularly the recordings. The defense had no way to explain what was clearly documented. "Your Honor," Maurice declared, "we also request the presentation of bank statements that demonstrate a systematic diversion of funds from the couple's joint account for Mrs. Deborah's personal use, especially during Mr. Hayes's travels. Significant amounts were transferred during the same periods when Helen was being neglected." The judge examined the financial documents carefully. "This suggests not only child abuse, but also misappropriation of funds. Mr. Mendelsohn, does your client have any explanation for these transfers?" Deborah leaned over and whispered something to her lawyer, who responded, "These are legitimate household expenses. Your Honor, my client managed the house in her husband's absence. Household expenses totaling $50,000 in 1 week," the judge questioned, raising an eyebrow. Without specific receipts or records, the most delicate part of the hearing arrived when it was time to hear Helen. Following special protocols for child testimonies, Judge Teresa, accompanied only by a forensic psychologist appointed by the court, met with the girl in an adapted room with a welcoming environment and available toys. The testimony was transmitted by video to the courtroom, where Gustavo, Deborah, and the lawyers watched in silence. The psychologist began with simple questions about Helen's routine, her school, her favorite activities, gradually establishing a connection with the child before addressing more sensitive topics. Helen, Can you tell me what it was like when your father traveled and you stayed with Aunt Deborah? The psychologist asked gently. The girl, sitting on a small, colorful sofa, hugged the teddy bear she had brought with her. It was different, she replied in a low voice. Aunt Deborah was angry with me all the time. Angry how? She yelled. She said I was ugly and stupid. Then my father only stayed with me because he had to. Helen paused, swallowing hard. And sometimes she wouldn't let me eat. She said I would get fat and no one would like me. In the courtroom, Gustavo clenched his fists, fighting against emotion. On the other side, Deborah maintained an inexpressive face, but her gaze revealed increasing tension. Did she ever hurt you, Helen? The judge asked in a gentle voice. The girl hesitated, looking down. Sometimes she squeezed my arms very hard, and once when I found a picture of my mommy, she got very angry and held my neck. Helen instinctively touched the area where there had been marks. It hurt a lot. And did she make you do dangerous things? Chores that children shouldn't do? Yes, Helen replied. She made me clean the roof because she said the gutters were clogged and would get my books wet. But then I understood it was a lie because she had already hidden my books. How do you feel now, living only with your father? Helen's face lit up. Better. I'm not scared all the time anymore. Daddy never yells at me or says he's going to send me away. She hugged the bear tighter, and he found the special book Mommy gave me. When the testimony ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom, except for Deborah's, which remained cold and calculating. Judge Teresa, visibly touched but maintaining professional composure, returned to the main room and announced, having analyzed all the evidence presented, including medical documentation, psychological reports, witness testimonies, financial records, recordings, and, crucially, the minor's own account. This court finds that there are sufficient elements to confirm the existence of a situation of risk and abuse. She paused, looking directly at Deborah. The protective orders already granted are maintained and expanded. Mrs. Deborah Montgomery Hayes is prohibited from establishing any contact, direct or indirect, with the minor Helen Hayes, and must maintain a minimum distance of 200 meters. Exclusive temporary custody is granted to Mr. Gustavo Hayes until the conclusion of the divorce proceedings and definition of permanent custody. Albert Mendelssohn rose to protest, but the judge proceeded. Furthermore, this court will forward a full copy of the records to the district attorney's office for investigation of possible crimes of mistreatment, psychological abuse, bodily harm, and misappropriation of funds. The sentence was clear and forceful. Deborah had lost not only the legal battle, but also the social facade she had maintained for so long. Her face finally betrayed emotion, not remorse, but contained fury as she was escorted out of the courtroom. In the corridor, away from cameras and reporters, Gustavo found Helen waiting with Valda. The girl ran into his arms and he lifted her, hugging her with all the strength of his love. "Is everything okay now, Princess?" he asked, wiping away a tear that stubbornly fell. Helen nodded with a small smile. "Yes, Daddy, can we go home?" "Of course, my love. Let's go home." As they walked out of the courthouse, protected by security guards who kept the press at a distance, Gustavo knew that the journey was not yet over. There would be the divorce process, possibly a criminal trial against Deborah, and most importantly, the long process of emotional healing for Helen. But the worst was over. His daughter was safe, the truth had prevailed, and now they could begin to rebuild their lives one day at a time, free from the shadow of abuse and fear. As he drove home, he watched Helen in the rearview mirror. The girl looked out the window, contemplating the sky that was beginning to be tinged with the colors of dusk. Her little face already seemed more serene, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from her small shoulders. "You know, Daddy," she said softly, "Mommy is watching everything from up there, isn't she?" "So I'm sure she is, Princess," Gustavo replied, his voice choked with emotion. "And she's very, very proud of you." "Of both of us," Helen corrected, with a wisdom that transcended her age. "Yes, of both of us," Gustavo agreed, feeling that despite all the trials, something precious had been preserved. His daughter's ability to trust, to love, and to believe in better days. That night, as he read The Stargirl to Helen before bed, Gustavo felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. The legal battle might continue, but the most important battle, Protecting his daughter and restoring her sense of security had been won. "Daddy," Helen murmured, already sleepy, "do you promise we'll always stay together?" "I promise, my love," he replied, stroking his daughter's hair. "Always." When Helen fell asleep, Gustavo remained by her side for a long time, watching her peaceful breathing. Judge Teresa's words echoed in his mind. True parental love is not measured by grand declarations or social appearances, but by the willingness to do whatever is necessary, to confront whoever is needed to protect one's child. Today we saw an example of that. It was a daunting responsibility, and at the same time the most precious privilege of his life, to be the guardian of that trusting little soul. A commitment he silently renewed each day. Outside the world might judge, the press might speculate, lawyers might battle, but there in that quiet room, lit only by the soft glow of the bedside lamp, what truly mattered was safe and at peace. And that, after all, was the only victory that truly counted. 6 months had passed since the hearing that had definitively changed the course of Gustavo and Helen's lives. Spring had arrived in Los Angeles, bringing with it an explosion of colors and fragrances that seemed to reflect the rebirth father and daughter were experiencing. The imposing Bel Air mansion, scene of so many painful memories, had been sold. Gustavo had opted for a complete new beginning, choosing a smaller yet cozy house in a tree-lined community in Pacific Palisades. With 3 bedrooms, a generous garden, and a view of a small nature preserve, the new home was everything they needed. A space for peace and rebuilding. Helen had personally chosen the colors for her new room, a cheerful light yellow for the walls, with aquamarine details in the curtains and pillows. Her bookshelf, now full again, occupied an entire wall. Beside the bed, a special nightstand housed her most precious treasure, the Stargirl book, now protected by a transparent cover to preserve it. The divorce process had concluded with surprising speed. Faced with irrefutable evidence of abuse and documented financial diversion, Deborah ended up accepting an unfavorable settlement, possibly to avoid prolonging her negative public exposure. She relinquished any rights to Gustavo's assets and agreed never to attempt contact with Helen again. As for the criminal case, it was still ongoing, but the prosecution had a solid case. Deborah faced charges of mistreatment, psychological abuse, bodily harm, and misappropriation of funds. Her public image was irrevocably tarnished, and her social circle, which she valued so much, had gradually distanced itself. The latest rumors indicated that she planned to move abroad as soon as the legal processes allowed. For Gustavo, legal justice was important, but secondary. His absolute priority was Helen's recovery and happiness, and progress in that regard was visible and moving every day. That sunny Saturday morning, Gustavo was making pancakes in the spacious kitchen when he heard Helen's light footsteps coming down the stairs. She appeared at the kitchen door, still in her pajamas, hair disheveled from sleep, hugging her teddy bear. "Good morning, Princess," Gustavo greeted, smiling at his daughter's sleepy and happy expression. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, Daddy," Helen replied, sitting at the kitchen table. "I dreamed of Mommy. She was in a very beautiful garden, full of colorful flowers, and she was smiling at me." Gustavo felt a pang in his chest, a mixture of sweetness and melancholy. In recent months, Helen had started talking more freely about Marianne, a healthy sign according to Dr. Caroline. "That was a beautiful dream then," he commented, placing a freshly prepared pancake on his daughter's plate. "It was," Helen agreed, reaching for the honey jar. "In the dream, Mommy said she's happy because we're happy." Gustavo just smiled, swallowing the lump in his throat. He sat down with his own plate, watching Helen eat with a healthy appetite, something that still filled him with relief every time he witnessed it. Helen's physical and emotional progress in recent months had been remarkable. Under Dr. Frederick's care, she had regained the appropriate weight for her age. Regular sessions with Dr. Caroline helped her process the trauma she experienced and rebuild her self-confidence. The school had reported significant improvements in her participation and social interaction. "We have a special day ahead," Gustavo reminded them as they ate. "After lunch, we're going to visit Grandma and Grandpa in Malibu. And tomorrow, it's a day for a trip to Griffith Park," Helen completed, excited. "I've already picked out my new bike." "Exactly. And maybe we can take bread for the ducks at the lake. Can we take Valda too? She said she's never ridden a paddle boat on the lake. Of course. Gustavo agreed, touched by his daughter's consideration for the housekeeper, who now worked for them in the new house and was practically part of the family. After breakfast, while Helen was getting ready for the day, Gustavo checked his emails. One of them, sent by Maurice, confirmed that the judge had granted Gustavo definitive and exclusive custody of Helen. A formality at this point, but one that brought an official sense of closure. Another email, this one from Robert Adams, his financial director and friend, detailed the changes implemented in the company. Gustavo had completely reorganized his professional life to be more present for Helen. He had delegated responsibilities, drastically reduced business trips, and established a schedule that allowed him to take and pick up his daughter from school almost every day. The company not only survived these changes, but prospered under the new, more delegative management model. Priorities became clear, Gustavo had explained to Robert when he announced the changes. No business success is worth my daughter's safety and happiness. Later that morning, as he helped Helen organize her books, Gustavo's phone rang. It was Paul Vance, the journalist who had published the responsible and balanced report on the case. Mr. Hayes, I apologize for bothering you on the weekend, Paul began, but I'd like to invite you to participate in a panel on child protection that we're organizing next month. It would be a discussion about warning signs, available resources, and the importance of acting quickly in suspicious cases. I don't know if it would be appropriate to expose our story in that way. Gustavo hesitated, looking at Helen, who was leafing through an adventure book. I perfectly understand your concern, the journalist replied. The invitation would be only for you, not for your daughter, and you could participate anonymously without specific identification of the case. The objective is not sensationalism, but education and awareness. Gustavo promised to think about it and hung up. The idea of transforming that painful experience into something that could help other children was tempting, but he needed to carefully consider the impact any additional exposure might have on Helen. He discussed the matter with Dr. Caroline the following week, during his own therapy session, something he had started to better cope with the guilt he still felt for not having noticed the signs of abuse sooner. If you participate anonymously, sharing the warning signs and the process of getting help, it can be a valuable contribution, the therapist opined. Many parents ignore important signs due to lack of knowledge or denial. Your experience can make a difference for other children. A month later, Gustavo accepted the invitation. In the auditorium of the law school at the University of Southern California, he participated in a panel with experts in family law, child psychology, and child protection. Without revealing identifiable details, he shared his experience. The initial signs he ignored, the behaviors that should have raised red flags, and the steps he took when he finally discovered the truth. The biggest mistake I made, he told the attentive audience, was believing that the stability of a marriage of appearances was worth more than my daughter's emotional safety. No social convention, no appearance of a perfect family, no concern about scandals should ever outweigh the protection of a child. His participation generated a significant impact. In the following weeks, Child Protective Services in the region registered an increase in reports of suspected abuse, and an organization supporting child victims of domestic violence reported that several families mentioned the panel as a catalyst for seeking help. For Gustavo, however, the true indicator that they were on the right track was daily life with Helen. The girl who once trembled when she knocked over a glass now ran freely through the garden, inventing stories, playing without the constant weight of fear. Her laughter, once so rare, now regularly echoed through the house. The change in eating habits was especially significant. On Sundays, they turned meal preparation into a joint ritual. Helen, with her colorful apron, helped prepare salads, mix ingredients, decorate desserts. The kitchen, once a place of tension and deprivation, had become a space for creativity and connection. "Daddy, can I put more chocolate on the cake frosting?" she asked one Sunday, as they prepared a chocolate cake to celebrate Valda's birthday. "Of course you can, Princess," Gustavo replied, smiling at his daughter's enthusiasm. "As much chocolate as you want." The joy in Helen's eyes upon hearing that, The simple freedom of being able to add more chocolate without fear of reprimand still moved him deeply. At school, the progress was equally remarkable. Helen's teacher, Cecilia Davies, sent regular reports on her advancements. "Helen is increasingly confident and participatory," she had recently written. "She has made new friends, and her academic performance is excellent. Most importantly, she smiles much more." The girl had also developed new interests. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, she attended violin lessons, an instrument she had chosen after watching a performance at school. On Saturday mornings, she participated in the condominium's girls' soccer team, revealing a natural talent for the sport that surprised everyone. Helen's 8th birthday, celebrated 3 months after the divorce was finalized, was a special but deliberately intimate occasion. Only her paternal grandparents, a few close school friends, Valda and her family, and the professionals who had been fundamental during the crisis, Dr. Frederick, Dr. Caroline, Maurice and his wife. "We don't need grand parties to impress anyone," Gustavo had explained when Valda asked if they wouldn't have a bigger celebration. "We just want to be with the people who truly love Helen." During the party, Laura Thompson, the social worker who continued to periodically follow the case, approached Gustavo. "It's truly inspiring to see this transformation," she commented, observing Helen playing happily with her friends. "You know, your case has inspired other families. I've had 3 parents in the last few weeks who cited the Hayes case as motivation to report abusive situations." "It's gratifying to know that our experience is helping others," Gustavo replied. "I just wish I had acted sooner." "The important thing is that you acted," Laura emphasized. "Many never reach that point. And look at her now. This is a child who feels loved and safe." At that moment, Helen ran up to them, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Daddy, Grandma, and Grandpa brought the present. Can I open it now?" "Of course you can, birthday girl," he replied, picking her up despite her protests that she was already too big for cuddles. The grandparents' gift was a telescope, inspired by Helen's growing passion for astronomy, an interest sparked by the Stargirl book. That same evening, after the guests left, Gustavo helped Helen set up the telescope in the garden. Together, they observed the moon, identified constellations, and talked about the mysteries of the universe. "You know, Daddy," Helen said, looking through the telescope, "I think Mommy really is up there, watching over us." "I'm sure she is, Princess," Gustavo replied. "Emotional. And she must be happy because we are happy now, right?" "Very happy," he agreed, hugging his daughter under the starry sky. In the following weeks, they established a new tradition. On weekends, when the weather allowed, they visited a small countryside property Gustavo had rented on the outskirts of Los Angeles. There, far from the urban hustle, Helen could run freely through the fields, observe birds, collect wildflowers, and discover small natural treasures like colorful stones and interesting leaves. "Look, Daddy," she exclaimed one of those afternoons, pointing to a tiny tadpole swimming in a puddle formed by recent rain. "It's going to get stuck when the water dries up." Together, they carefully transferred the tadpoles to a nearby stream, watching them swim to freedom. It was a metaphor that did not go unnoticed by Gustavo, the rescue of vulnerable creatures from dangerous situations, giving them a chance to grow and thrive in suitable environments. At night, sitting on the rustic porch of the countryside property, drinking hot chocolate, Helen often asked her father to braid her hair, another simple ritual they had developed, a moment of quiet connection before bedtime. "Daddy," she asked one night, as Gustavo delicately braided her brown hair, "do you think I'll forget the bad things that happened someday?" Gustavo reflected carefully before answering, recalling Dr. Caroline's guidance on age-appropriate honesty. "I think you won't completely forget, my love. But those memories will become less and less important, less present in your daily life. It's like a scar that fades over time. You know it's there, but it no longer hurts. It doesn't prevent you from being happy and doing everything you want in life." Helen nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. "I hardly ever think about it anymore. Only once in a while when I see someone who looks like her on the street or on TV. And that's normal. If it happens and you feel sad or scared, you can always tell me, okay?" "I know, Daddy," she turned, hugging him tightly. "You're always here for me. Always, Princess. It's a promise." When they returned to the city, Gustavo received an unexpected email from Helen's school principal. The text of an essay written by the girl for Father's Day had been selected to be read at the school's annual awards ceremony. The principal had attached the text, asking if Gustavo authorized its public reading. With tears in his eyes, he read the essay titled My Hero. My dad is a hero, but not one of those caped ones who fly through the sky. He's a real hero, who saved me when I was scared and sad. When bad people wanted to hurt me, he found out and didn't let them. He protected me and showed me that I am important and loved. My dad taught me that real heroes aren't perfect. They also get sad, they also cry, they also make mistakes. But what makes them heroes is never giving up on protecting those they love. My dad works a lot, but he always has time to read stories with me, help with homework, braid my hair, and look at the stars through the telescope. He taught me that family doesn't have to be big or like on TV shows to be special. Our family is small. It's me, my dad Valda, who takes care of us, and my mum, who became a star in the sky. But it's full of love, and that's what matters. When I grow up, I want to be brave like my dad. I want to protect those who need help and never be afraid to do what's right, even when it's hard. Thank you, Daddy, for being my hero every day. Gustavo authorized the reading, but asked the principal not to explicitly identify the situation that inspired the text. On the day of the ceremony, he sat in the audience, beside Helen's grandparents, who had come especially for the occasion. When the girl stepped onto the stage to receive her certificate, small but confident, the warm applause from the audience seemed to confirm what Gustavo already knew. Helen was moving forward, building her own narrative of overcoming and strength. Later, when they were alone, Gustavo gently corrected his daughter. You know, Princess, you wrote that I am the hero, but the true heroine of this story is you. Me? Helen asked, surprised. Yes, you, because it was you who had the courage to tell the truth, even though you were very scared. It was you who resisted, who maintained your kindness and your light even when everything was difficult. That is truly heroic. Helen reflected on this for a moment, then smiled. That luminous smile that was the greatest reward Gustavo could wish for. On the refrigerator in the cozy kitchen of their new home, beside shopping lists and daily notes, a magnet held the award-winning essay. Beside it, a recent photo, father and daughter smiling, embracing under an autumn sky, both wearing matching soccer team jerseys. And on Helen's bedroom bookshelf, in a place of honor, the Stargirl book continued to hold on its first page, Marianne's dedication, words of eternal love that, against all attempts at erasure, had survived to remind Helen of her origins and the journey that had brought her there. On the last page of the book, Helen had added in her careful, childlike handwriting an alternative ending to the story, and the girl discovered that, even when life gets dark and scary, there are always stars shining to guide our way. Some stars are in the sky, and others are here on Earth taking care of us every day. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Gustavo and Helen's story has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on the left. If you enjoyed this narrative, be sure to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to seeing you in the comments.